Hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. In this programme today, we'll be asking the question, public relations versus propaganda in the truth for Israel and the Jewish people. Over the past decade, we've witnessed a demonisation of Israel and the Jewish people due to false and inaccurate media reporting that in many cases has led to an increase in anti-Semitism that has also changed the perception of Israel and the Jewish state in a negative fashion. We'll be discussing ways that we can counter this media war against Israel and how Israel can effectively win the PR battle. The second part of the programme we will be discussing is the alarming and very disturbing rise of anti-Semitism across the continent of Europe once again. It was only 70 years ago that the Jewish people were sent to the gas chambers. And again today, we're witnessing the ugly rise of anti-Semitism as Jewish communities across Europe feel vulnerable to this new wave and level of attacks. And it's time that the Christian community stood by the Jewish people once again. Well, I'm joined today by Charlotte Gutman, who's travelled here all the way from Brussels on the Eurostar to be with me. And she is the Vice President of the Jewish community in Belgium. Charlotte, hello and welcome to the Middle East Report. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme and thank you for making a long trip all the way to be here today.
Thank you, Simon. It was a pleasure. And I would like to thank you for very warmly for inviting me in your program and for supporting the Jewish case, I would say, and also the friendship between Christians and Jews.
Thank you. Well, it's my pleasure, and I think we owe so much to Israel and the Jewish community. I know that you're doing very, very good work in Belgium, and our viewers need to know what's happening in terms of Israel and the Jewish community in Europe, but also in Belgium as well. Charlotte, can you tell us a little bit more about your Jewish background and the very important work you do for Israel in terms of public relations?
Well, I'm involved in the Jewish community for more than 40 years. And my involvement has been really in many aspects, but mainly today it's my involvement with the PR work, the public relations work. And indeed, I refer to your title, PR versus propaganda. This is my subject for many years. And I think I will talk about this subject for many, many more years, unfortunately. The mission I have is really to contribute at my level to re-establish the truth and the dignity about Israel and Israelis. And this is the main subject. I am re-elected. I was re-elected a few weeks ago as the Vice President of the Jewish community, which I'm very proud of. And I used to be involved also in the different community centers with the media, Jewish media in Belgium. And my role today is really the media on behalf of the Jewish community. And I'm trying to establish the contact between the media, the journalists, the political journalists, the journalists dealing with communities, and my president of the Jewish community, Dr. Maurice Sosnowski.
Excellent. But you also have a very interesting family, don't you? And your father has, and your mother have incredible stories of incredible survival against all odds, really.
Yes.
With surviving the Shoah, the Holocaust.
This is the story of the Jewish people in Europe, unfortunately. My father was the survivor, the only survivor of a family of 38 people from Berlin. He survived Auschwitz, the death walk, and Buchenwald, where he was liberated on this exact day, April 11, 1945, by the Americans. My mother was born in Kiev, and she escaped with her mother and an aunt and cousins the Babi Yar dramatic terrorist or extermination against Jews. And they escaped to the east of Europe, and were saved, in fact, in Uzbekistan. There were Jews who were escaped in Uzbekistan. There were Jews who even escaped further and went to China even. So this is the background of my family, and obviously, as a daughter, elderly daughter of my parents, I felt very strongly the non-verbal messages they gave without willing to give them, of course. They didn't want to speak about this period of their life, and I think they were really traumatized people. And my mother is there, and she's a source of optimism and loving life, as my father was, actually.
So what was it like growing up after the Second World War, knowing that your father survived the Holocaust and a very small Jewish community in Belgium in comparison to what it was prior to World War II?
Well, Belgium was a coincidence of choice by my father after the liberation of Buchenwald, because obviously he didn't want to stay in Germany. And when he found out he was the only survivor, I mean, he had no reason to live in Germany anymore any longer. It was only related to very traumatic souvenirs. And so he established himself with survivors of Buchenwald who advised him to come and live in Brussels. And so he was in Brussels and discovered this country, a new language, and he was a refugee in 45, of course. And in 48, he was convinced with another 40 orphans, survivors of the Shoah, to go and try to help the newly Israeli army in the independence war to help.
Amazing.
And so a lot of these youngsters, he was 20 at the time, a lot of these youngsters who survived the Shoah ended up sometimes losing their lives in fighting for Israel. And he was on a Marine on the first frigate brought to Israel in 48.
Amazing. And
in Haifa, where he ended up with the ship, he met with my mother.
Oh, wonderful.
Who had made all the way through the refugee camps throughout Europe and entered Palestine and ended up meeting my father, and they married in Israel, actually.
Oh, wonderful. And I don't know if you can see there, but there's a picture of him. Can you tell us a little bit about this book, Charlotte? It's got your father with your surname, Gutmann Plaza. Can you tell us something about this? Because I think it's very special.
Yes, it is very special. The municipality of Berlin, from where my father was coming, and his family actually, decided, based on a book of a journalist, a Berliner journalist, in '95, published a book about Jewish families in this neighborhood, Mahlsdorf, Ellensdorf, where the family Gutmann was living before they were taken. And the municipality decided in 2008 that Gutmann Platz would be nominated on a square that didn't have a name. And they chose, in the book of so many families, they chose my father's story. And he lived long enough to have this present to be offered a square under the name of his parents, sisters, and brothers who didn't make it through, as he was the only survivor. And so I think it was for him like, closing a file, that he could say the Kaddish, the prayer for his family, that he had no place to make this prayer, because one's died in Buchenwald, the others in Auschwitz, and so he never was willing to go back there, actually. He said, I saw enough of it. And when I visited Auschwitz the first time, and I called him on my mobile, and I said, I'm in Auschwitz. You know what was his question? It's amazing. I visited Auschwitz a few years ago for the first time. He was asking me, is the hill of ashes still there? It was a very strong question, and I mean, I was completely moved by this question, which I never heard from his mouth. And you can imagine.
Can you describe for our viewers what the hill of ashes is?
Well, it was a big hill of ashes next to the gas chamber, and
So
where they were burning
the bodies.
Yes. And so you see with what he was living, what kind of images he was trying to live normally. But as I say about the Israelis also, they live normally in a completely abnormal situation. And this is the story of all the survivors of this traumatic period as Jews, yes. Of course, there were Jews who were luckier, like my family-in-law. They were hidden in families in Belgium. Belgium was one of the countries that has hidden most of Jewish children. I think they reached more than 4,000 Jewish children. It was really a network of resistance to save the Jewish children, at least. And so we have in our community group one of the 40 organizations that we represent is the Hidden Child. And they have more than 1,000 members, because these children who were saved in the war today are grandparents and are members of this organization.
Wonderful. Which really does show the incredible story of the Jewish people and that instinct for survival and then prospering out of horrendous circumstances. I know that we said earlier, and we talked about earlier, your involvement in the Jewish community in Belgium, extremely active, which is wonderful. Have you seen, in the case of a lot of the public relations work you've been doing over the last few years, a change in the perception of Israel and the Jewish people?
The situation is such that the journalists who are dealing with Israel, political journalists, are often not journalists respecting the ethics of journalists. And they became militants. So I can give you the example of one that I tried to connect with in the beginning of my new position in the community. And I thought this is the number one I have to talk to. And what do I hear? He went 40 times to Israel, 40 times to Israel. But his direct destination was not Israel, was Gaza. And he spent 40 years visiting, 40 times visiting Gaza. So you can imagine the brainwash that he went through, because I really consider that the journalists are being brainwashed first. And through their articles, they are responsible for the brainwash of public opinion, not only in Europe, I think worldwide, because the communication tools today enable the messages to go simultaneously and internationally in a minute. So this is what we are witnessing, all of us today. And this brainwash is based on biased information. And it's terrible, because the way they write is a caricature way. And I would like, if you don't mind, talk about here the Code of Ethics for Journalists.
Sure, of course.
There are 10 points that journalists need to respect, and I think they are not respecting them. Now, I don't want to pinpoint specific journalists, but in general, that's why we are in such a situation today, where we can't say a positive word about Israel, because in a way we are being trapped somehow in an image, in a biased image that is, preceding us in whatever we want to say. First, we have to respect the freedom of the press, for sure. But today, it's a bit strange, because the freedom of the press is being used as an asset by the ones who want to say and put the lies forward.
Yeah.
So they need to handle objectively the facts. Sometimes they are not looking into the facts. They're just repeating and duplicating what is written maybe in a press release they receive. I can imagine they receive a lot of press releases, anti-Israeli press releases. They have to separate information from comments. And you know, I witnessed a few weeks ago on a French television channel, there was an interview by the journalist of the Prime Minister of Israel. And the way she was asking the question was, you know, accusing the Prime Minister of Israel in the way she was asking the question. So I thought, where is the journalist in there? It's already militant behavior. Because in Europe, we have to admit that the public opinion, politically correct public opinion, is pro-Palestinian and anti-Israeli, unfortunately. Obviously, they need to respect others' opinion, respect human dignity. And I think sometimes they don't, in case of the Israeli country. They cannot glorify violence. And I think today the violence is all over the TV channels. The experts of Miami, the experts of Miami, and in the news, it's only the bad news. And when I try to tell them that why don't they show the friendship between Muslims and Jews in Israel, they are not interested in these stories. They just want the dramatic and accounting, the demoniac accounting of deaths, of casualties. They have to rectify wrong information, which obviously, when you want to rectify a wrong information that was published, you will never get the publicity of what was the first information that you are trying to rectify. This is the story of the Goldstone report. This is the story of the Mohammed al-Dura, symbol of the Second Intifada, and that's it. You will never be able to rectify it in the same.
And the Jenin massacre, is the so-called Jenin massacre, that didn't turn out to be a massacre as well. Yeah.
They have to protect sources of information, which they do, respect confidentiality, respect human rights, and independence. And obviously, advertising cannot be presented as information.
So looking at this, really the 1980s, we had two major conflicts in the Middle East in the 1980s. Well, we had quite a few, but in terms of Israel's involvement, we had the Lebanon War in 1982, in which Israel went to war against the PLO, who were firing missiles and rockets over and terrorizing northern Israel. And Israel then came to defense of the Christian president in Lebanon and the Christian community in Lebanon, who were under siege from the PLO. Which then really started media scrutiny upon Israel. And then in 1987, we had the first Palestinian uprising known as the First Intifada, in which Israel perception was changed away from being David into being a Goliath against the so-called oppressed Palestinians. How come it's taken Israel so long to realize that she's in a media war, and how long it's taken her to realize that she needs a very effective public relations campaign in order to put her message and her perception across?
First Intifada, I was employee in an Israeli multinational company in the graphic arts industry. And I suggested to the management to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this company. It was Cytex. I don't know if you heard of it. And the management said I was completely crazy, but they let me do my project. And they thought I would fail with my project of organizing a group from Europe, visiting Israel, and celebrating the 20th anniversary. And we had a Christian tour, actually. And for me, it was the first time I visited Israel on the Christian side. It was very interesting for me to participate in this trip, because it took place, this trip. I had 55 participants, mainly clients, also journalists, who paid for 1 week in Israel during the First Intifada. And so this I consider as my first success. Second Intifada, in between, in '96, I had a group, I brought a lot of journalists, telecom, high-tech, business journalists to Israel to visit my Israeli clients that I had through my European PR agency.